to trust someone, you must know it. You're all familiar with the chair you're sitting on. You know the functions and the attribute of a chair. I'm not sure they've designed chairs that have 3 legs, but you know that chairs would have 4 legs. They would have, it would have a bit of a comfort for you to sit on. That's why you're able to identify when you see a crooked um, chair, and you know that I'm not going to sit on this because it won't hold me. So the same thing with God. For you to increase your trust level in God, you must know who that God is. I'm going to pick some few things from the manual. And the very first paragraph of the first lesson, confidence in God is not built upon emotions and feelings, but on our belief and understanding of God's nature and character. It says, on God's nature and character. And we looked at certain key things. That how do we develop this trust? How do we develop a trust in God? I remember a friend of mine. She's late now, and I was trying to minister to her about Christ, and she was like, "Doing, I don't. It's difficult for me to believe. I can't see this God. I can't feel him." She was going through issues then, a bit of a depression. And I can remember that this morning I remembered her. And she said, it's difficult for me to believe what you're saying. It's easy for me to believe you because I can see you. And I pondered this morning on it. How many of us struggle with that, even as believers, to trust God for victory? It's easy to believe in my intellect that if I have a master's, if I go to school, if I have a mortgage, if I have my mortgage paid, if I have these things that I can see, I can plan, then I can have victory. I can see the path. But what we've learned this whole month of November is trusting the God that we do not see, but we can feel and we can see his good works in us and around us. So, but how do we get to that state whereby you can put your trust in someone that you're not seeing? You can put your trust in me now because you see me, you can describe me. And that's what we looked at. And we said, for us to do that, we need to understand the nature and character of God. That was the very first point. And it says we cannot trust a God we do not know. We must know the attributes and promises of God in order to trust him well and benefit from his promises. That was the very first thing, And the whole, I think for me, the whole of November is based on 2 points: understanding the nature and character of God and casting away fear. Once you're able to put that into actions, then you can activate an increase of your trust in God. We spent time in that. Another point that we did in the first class or the first lesson that I'm going to point out is the number 3 point of it. Know that the Lord is your helper and advocator. John 14:26. But the Comforter, Counselor, Helper, Intercessor, Advocate, Strengthener, stand by, and the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, in my place to represent me and act on my behalf. He will teach you all things, and it will cause you to recall, will remind you of, bring to your remembrance everything I have told you. This morning I underlined that word, everything I have told you. You don't see him, but yet you want to trust in him. And yet he's given us the Holy Spirit as the comforter, the teacher, the advocate. And he will remind you of everything that I have told you about himself. And that's why it is important for us to increase our trust in God, whether in this month of November or beyond, that we know this God. And in knowing this God, I've said it last month or thereabout, I was just dialoguing, and the Holy Spirit just brought it, and I think I've shared it to so many people around me, that if the likes of companies like Nissan, Toyota, Tesla can develop cars and vehicles, and we